into everything that we've seen. The biggest thing that we have seen started today that has been being talked about everywhere because it was a pretty big one. If you're a Falcons fan, you already know what this is going to be about, and that is the roughing the passer call against Tom Brady. And I'm going to kick it to Dan to start on this because I know you probably have a pretty passionate feeling on this based on our text conversations. After seeing that play, seeing the flag get thrown, when it being Tom Brady, initial reactions, just go ahead and give me, I know you probably got a little rant ready. I'm going to give it to you.
Listen, my initial reaction was, of course, right? I mean, it's Tom freaking Brady. He gets the benefit of the call every single time. It's absolutely absurd. And it's a big topic when every single person is hitting on it. I'm talking about you've got NFL executives hitting on it. You've got ESPN. You've got NFL Network. You've got everybody hitting on this thing. Shannon Sharp, who hates everything Atlanta, is out here tweeting that this is an outrage. And you've got Pioli tweeting. You've got all these guys. And, one of the things, and I'm not going to say who said it, you can, it's easy to go find. I probably retweeted it at this point. But an NFL executive said at this point, you have to question the integrity of the league. And that is bad. That is the territory the NBA got into with Donaghy when there was some stuff going on. Now, listen, do I think it necessarily matters? No, but that's why it matters, okay? Because these referees are taking games that they don't think a lot of people are paying attention to, and they're altering the outcome of the game. There is no way, there's no shape, way, or form. I'm flustered. I can't even get out my point, but there is no possible way you can call roughing the passer on that play. When I initially saw the flag, I thought it was because Tom Brady kicked him. And then I was like, wait, it's Tom Brady. There's no way they're going to call that on him. I'm like, did he? And then I'm like thinking to myself, did he go hands to the face? Did he have his hand inside of his collar? Like, no, he was around his waist, and then he just rolled. I know even Brooks talked about on Twitter that the NFL has gone to the rugby style of tackling where you're trying to keep your head out of the tackle, and that's exactly what he did. He rolled it up. And the thing that makes it even worse was Marcus Mariota was sacked on the exact type play earlier in the football game. I can't remember who it was who got him, and that's irrelevant. But he was sacked exactly the same way. Hands around the waist, twist, tackle to the ground, and no flag was called. And nor should it have, okay, guys? Nor should it have. I am flabbergasted that was allowed to happen. And then Jerome Booger had the stones to go out there and say he threw him to the ground too violently.
Unnecessarily that's what he said. Unnecessarily threw him to the ground. What? Jonathan, what was your thoughts?
I think it's pretty telling that Grady Jarrett after the game refused to take any comments about the sack because he knows that it should have never been called. And the thing that frustrated me is I don't know if it was actually called late, but what it seemed like to me is the sack happened. Both players get up. Brady immediately starts looking at the refs saying that was roughing the passer. And then to me, it seemed like the penalty was thrown at about that time when Brady, of course, goes on his little rant to the ref about like, hey, man, you're not going to protect me. Yeah, we don't care that you're 45 years old, Tom Brady. We don't. You're the one that's elected to come out here. And he's probably a big reason why a lot of these rules are being put into place to protect all these quarterbacks because of him. And, he's a big figure in the league. You got to protect where a lot of your money comes from. He's a big portion of why there's a lot of money in the NFL right now. So I think it's just ridiculous that was called in that moment. The Falcons had a chance to come back and win that game at that point. They had done everything up until that point. They went for 2 points after scoring the touchdown to bring it within 6, even though they could have just kicked the PAT and went for the tie later on. And so then for the game to be decided in that very moment is just so infuriating. Even if you're not a Falcons fan, there's a reason why, exactly what Dan said, there's a reason why every single person that was watching that game, whether they were a Buccaneers fan or a Falcons fan or just watching the game in general, that they complained about the call because nobody wants that call dictating their team in that game. Nobody. So it's ridiculous that the refs felt like they had to make that call in that situation, and then the rest was history. That was it. Brady moves to 11-0 versus the Falcons, and that's it.
And I think the one thing that's extremely frustrating is you understand why we are trying to protect the quarterbacks. If you look across the league right now with as many backup quarterbacks that are playing, and if we're being honest, gentlemen, I know we love the product, but the product is not as good with the backup quarterbacks playing.
No, it is
and
not.
They are trying to protect them. But my biggest issue with that is it's got to be across the board level, right? I mean, look at what happened to Cody Pickett for the Steelers. Listen, I understand he was out of the pocket, but it was low and late to the leg, right? Across the board, if you go low and late on a quarterback, that is a flag. So, somebody on Twitter was like, no flag should have been thrown there. I'm like, okay, well, if that's the case, then you cannot excuse the flag on Tom
That was
Brady,
also the second time that they took a shot at Kenny Pickett in that game. The first one, he was scrambling and he took the first down and he slid and he was in his slide and he got popped right in the chest. They still didn't throw a flag on that play either. So you don't protect other quarterbacks out there. There's obviously all the issues going on with Tua, which we're going to get more into that as well because there's been some updates of the concussion protocol. So I'm not going to get into that too much right now. But think about plays like that Tua took, right? Tua got slung to the ground, his head busted, and that's what caused him to have a concussion. They didn't throw a flag on that play. And this one, Tom Brady gets wrapped up in the waist, and you already can't land on the quarterback, right? That's already the rule. You cannot land with your weight on the quarterback. So what does Grady Jarrett do? He turns and twists around so that way Tom Brady lands on top of him. What's he supposed to do at that point? Let Tom Brady get up off of him? No, he's got to bring him to the ground still. So he has to finish twisting to get him to the ground. That's literally what you are supposed to do since you aren't allowed to land on quarterbacks anymore. What else are you supposed to do as a defensive lineman or defensive back or a linebacker, whoever, that you're going to hit the quarterback? You're not allowed to bring him to the ground anymore? That was the biggest bull crap that I've ever seen. And it literally happened. Tom Brady got taken down. Like you said, I saw the same thing. He slung his leg up and kicked Grady Jarrett. That should have been a flag on his own because he literally kicked Grady Jarrett after the play, got up, walked over to the ref and was like, hey, where's the flag? And all of a sudden there's a flag thrown. The flag wasn't even thrown until he started asking for it. That's where you have to go back to what Dan said a little bit ago, and that's the integrity of the game because you have a guy that's going over there and saying, hey, I want a flag. Give me the flag. And they're going, all right, you're Tom Brady. You've been in the league for 20 plus years. You're 45. We're going to give it to you. No, that's ridiculous. It wasn't a penalty. There was plenty of other plays like that in the game. Like you said earlier, Dan, that didn't get called. You cannot call that one when the game is on the line. That play right there literally lost the game for the Falcons. They were getting the ball back with like 2 minutes left on the clock, had plenty of time to go down. And Jonathan, you pointed it out. They went for 2 earlier, so it was only a 6-point game. They were clearly playing to win the game. They were not playing for a tie. That's why they went for that 2-point conversion earlier. And they got taken out of their hands because a ref decided, hey, I'm going to give this to Tom Brady. And this is you referenced it a second ago, Dan, so I'm going to touch on it now. This is exactly what the ref said. He said, what I had was a defender grabbed the quarterback while he was still in the pocket and unnecessarily threw him to the ground. That is what I had making my decision based upon.
I mean, what the heck else? I know we keep saying this in this little rant of ours, but what the heck else are players supposed to do? You are leaving them no other options when attacking the quarterback. I mean, we see it. Even if you just swipe their head with your hand when going by it, that's roughing the passer. The league is doing everything they can to protect these guys, but yet they're still getting hurt. There's tons of quarterback injuries around the league. Heck, I think just this week in the SEC, there were 5 quarterbacks that were out. Starting quarterbacks that didn't play. Max Johnson, Bryce Young, Will Levis didn't play. Arkansas's quarterback didn't play. There was tons of them all across the league in the SEC. And now you're seeing in the NFL too. It seems like every team's having to play their backup quarterback right now. So, I mean, I just don't – you aren't leaving the defense many options to take down the quarterback.
The only backup quarterback that's not playing is the one that we all want to see, and that's Desmond Ridder.
Right.
Listen, Marcus has done a really good job, but at some point they're going to have to play Desmond Ridder because we have to know what we have in Desmond Ridder, because if you're going to get a top pick in the draft, which – I think the Falcons are going to win more games than we thought, fellas, and I think they may be out of that quarterback sweepstake, so it may not matter. But assuming that you're going to be at the top portion of the draft, you would like to know what you have on your roster so that you can make an informed decision, Jeremiah.
So with that, Dan, because that's a very valid point, and think about this game specifically, this is now the 3rd loss that they have on their record that could have been won. And this one was, the first 2 games were kind of a collapse on their part. The first one, they gave up a huge lead and they lost. And then the second one was the Rams, and they actually came back on a death march themselves and almost took that game back against the Rams, who now have lost. I think they're under 500 for the first time in a long time themselves right now. They lost to the Cowboys this afternoon. But now this is the 3rd game they've lost that they could have won. So all of a sudden, like a couple plays in each of those games, and the Falcons could easily be 4-1. They could even be, honestly, 5-0 because of the way that this has all shaken out. And so do you really want to go to Ritter? Because Mariota is the guy that's who's supposed to carry you through a season where you're trying to transition, and you don't necessarily want to go and see what you have just yet, because that season is still within grasp of a playoff spot. If you can win these games, if the refs don't take this out of your hands today, you're above 500, and all of a sudden you're in the hunt.
Now, I will say the Falcons are in a lot better position than what we thought they would be, but I don't know that has much to do with Marcus Mariota. I think he's very much holding this offense back. Now, I also will say we don't know what happens at practice every single week. We do not know how Desmond Ridder is performing in practice, so we don't even know if he's ready or not to take on that role yet.
True.
And there's a reason why Arthur Smith has not put him in the game yet. I trust Arthur Smith at this point, whether how much people want to ridicule or not, which, by the way, he had a choice of words to say to the referees today. I don't know if you guys caught that, but he did not hold back one bit to those guys. So I would fight for that man every single day.
A press conference? I didn't see a press conference today.
I did not see anything.
He did do one. I just have not watched it yet.
I haven't seen it either.
I mean, you also have to understand the NFL is different, right? Where Marcus Mariota was a free agent, he could have went anywhere he wanted to. He agreed to come here to play for Arthur Smith, and they have a relationship. And you have to assume that part of that conversation was, hey, it's your team. I'm going to give you this shot because it's a 1-year deal, if I'm not mistaken, with Mariota.
I think
a 2-year deal.
Okay. It is 2, yeah.
I think,
but it's very, very team friendly, meaning if he were to come in here, play really well, and they might be able to move him. So you have to assume that there probably was some type of an agreement where you're going to do me a favor by coming to a team that nobody really wanted to come to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an opportunity to put on some really, really good tape and potentially get yourself a long-term deal somewhere else. So I'm sure that is part of it. I'm not saying that Arthur Smith would do that in spite of trying to win. I'm not making that accusation. I'm just saying that that's definitely part of the conversation, and we're only 5 weeks into a 17-week season.
Yeah, I think that definitely plays a factor into the decision making, that you go out and you get a guy like that has experience. And once again, I think it's one of those things that when you usually see in the NFL, it's different. Like you said earlier, this is the NFL, not college football. It's very different of how they handle that backup quarterback position and everything. What I think we see is we get a few more games in. If the Falcons, if they keep winning, you're not going to see them make a quarterback move, because that could completely shift. Like I understand, Jonathan, that Mariota is not the reason you're winning some games, or he's not necessarily who's keeping you in these games, but that is a big culture shift and a big change. You don't know how Ridder can command the huddle and how he can command that offense, even outside of making physical plays. And so I don't think they make that change if the Falcons keep winning. Now, if the Falcons win the next or lose the next like 3 games, and all of a sudden they're at like 2-4 or 2-5 or 2-6, and then they might make a move because they're going, all right, we're kind of late in the season. Like, let's see what the young kid can do, and let's go from there. So I think that's very possible down the road. But as of right now, I think that's kind of where you're sitting. But there was a lot of other games in the NFL today. And so I kind of wanted to get you guys to tell me what game stood out to you, Dan, that stood out most to you today that you saw. There's a lot of games in the early, the early slate today that were pretty good. So I just kind of let me know what you thought.
So for me, the first thing that popped out was Josh Allen. My goodness, that guy is an absolute stud. Listen, I know they weren't playing the best team in the Steelers, but he put on an absolute show. So the first thing was Josh Allen. I thought the Bears and the Vikings game, although it may have set offense back a while, the game itself was compelling. It was back and forth, and it came down to the wire. Justin Fields actually made a couple plays, guys. I mean, that you can't really put that loss on Justin Fields. And the Patriots breaking out the old uniforms, which I hate the Patriots, love the uniforms.
I do like those uniforms.
And then the Saint Seahawks and the Saint Seahawks was a good game. And then in the later one, the Eagles and Arizona, believe it or not, was a fantastic football game. Came down to the wire. I mean, really, for me, in those early slated games, I was really going back to what we talk about every week, how every game is close at some point, right? If a team stretches out a lead, like I know you guys didn't wake up and watch the Giants and the Packers, But the Packers get out to a 20-10 lead, and then the Giants come back and take the win away from them out there in London. And it was like that all day. I mean, very few games were just complete blowouts. A lot of them, maybe one team got out to a big lead, the other team came storming back. I just think the games themselves have been very entertaining. Maybe not the highest quality that we've seen in the past, but they're entertaining. And it is very hard to just put your finger on one thing. I guess the biggest thing for me was just Josh Allen. He was amazing. I mean,
wasn't it 350 yards in the first half?
350 yards and 4 touchdowns in the first half. Hey, I mean, if they wanted to break Norm Van Brocklin's record of 500 and whatever yards, they could have done that easily today. Jonathan, what game caught your interest?
Well, that one definitely caught my attention because I played Josh Allen in fantasy this week. So that one certainly caught my attention. Bad week to play him.
That's rough.
But the one that really caught my attention was Chargers versus Browns. I mean, Chubb and Eckler were freaking going at it. I think Eckler had around 178 total yards today, something absurd like that. And then Chubb put up around 120 rushing yards of his own and had a receiving touchdown, I believe, as well. Both dudes just put up absolute big numbers today, and it came down to the wire. That was a close game. So always good to see Nick Chubb flourishing in his role with the Browns. I don't know how at this point you don't say he's the best running back in the league right now. Every single week, he is outperforming everybody. And here's the kicker. Here's the real thing. No one else is being as consistent as Nick Chubb is. That's the thing. Derrick Henry has his games every now and then where he, of course, plays pretty well. Saquon Barkley plays pretty solid for the Giants. But it seems like every single week, Nick Chubb is putting up big numbers for the Browns. So I don't know how you make any other argument for anybody other than Nick Chubb being the best running back in the league right now. I don't see it. But then also going back to the Steelers and the Bills game, George Pickens had yet another big day for the Steelers. Dude goes viral every single week. I mean, it's just going to be part of the NFL for a long time now.
Bullies defensive backs at the line of scrimmage too.
Oh,
good God.
I'm sure a lot of Georgia fans notice this is that he mossed Kair Elam, who played at the University of Florida on the one big catch that he had. So I'm sure that made it even sweeter today. But again, he had 102 receiving yards last week on 6 catches. This week he had 6 catches with 83 yards. Guy's getting hot. And as the season progresses, he's getting more targets. I think he had 16 targets the last 2 weeks total. So they're throwing the ball more his way. They're taking notice of him, and George Pickens is making the most of those moments. So out of those 2 games, man, a lot of dog talk, but those are the 2 things that honestly just really caught my eye the most.
Yeah, and I think out of those, you tweeted about this earlier, so I'm kind of stealing your own stuff there. I think out of those 16, he had, 12 catches for 160 yards or something like that.
185, I think.
185 yards. Okay. So in those, he's effective. He's catching most of the targets coming his way and everything as well. 2 games stood out to me. The first one was in the earlier set of the games this weekend, the 1:00 games, was the Seahawks and the Saints. That game was a really back and forth game all the way to the end of it. No defense at all. No, you're right. But 2 things I wanted to talk about this game it was crazy because it's late in the game, right? You're in the 4th quarter. There's about 6-7 minutes left. And all of a sudden, Kenneth Walker, who is a rookie, I believe, running back.
Michigan State.
Yeah, from Michigan State. Yep. Rookie running back. He busts one for 69 yards, takes the lead over the Saints. And all of a sudden, Saints get the ball coming back the other way. And all of a sudden, Taysom Hill comes in the game and busts one out. They don't even have a wide receiver on the field. I swear to God, they had tight end sets. They had a bunch set in, and he busts one for 60 yards. So the running game late in that game actually was the decision or the deciding factor of it, which was crazy to see late in the game that they actually just bust these huge runs off versus just throwing the ball out and getting rid of the running game. When it works, you keep going. The one that I wanted to open up to discussion on this was, let's talk about Geno Smith. Geno Smith almost threw for another 300 yards today. He's having a record season, and it kind of made me want to talk about him because you saw Russell Wilson have so much success in Seattle, and now Russell Wilson goes on to Denver, and he looks terrible. And maybe it's the team, maybe it's the stuff, or maybe he's not as good as we all thought. I don't know. $250 million later, we'll find out in the next couple seasons, I guess, of how that continues to grow. Is it a quarterback dream to play in Seattle? Do you have the offense around you? You have DK Metcalf. You have some decent running backs behind you. Is it one of those things that the offense is making him play like that? Or is it Geno Smith is just surprisingly good and we just didn't know about him?
Well, I think it's funny because Cannon was actually watching football with me today, which is breaking news in itself is that the kid was in the same room as me, and we were watching. He's like, is this guy a backup? Another one of these backups is their quarterback? And I'm like, no, he's their quarterback. He's like, where did he come from? I'm like, the guy was like a top 5 pick a few years ago, and
he tore
was
it
dead
up
buried.
at West Virginia.
He did.
Yeah.
He was great at West Virginia.
They buried him, and everybody thought he was dead and gone. And I think this is a prime example of a lot of these quarterbacks who flame out in the NFL. It's not because they're not talented enough. It's because the team that they're paired with is not a good fit. The offense isn't a good fit. The scheme's not a good fit. The coaches aren't a good fit. Maybe they don't have the personnel that fits what this guy likes to do. And I think more decision-making needs to go into the fits. And I know that sounds so simplistic, but it doesn't happen. If you look at all these different teams, is that they're taking quarterbacks, and like on the surface, you could say like that doesn't make any sense. Like, for example, for me, when Trevor Lawrence went to Clemson at the time, you remember Clemson was running a spread wide open RPO type offense. I'm like, that doesn't fit what Trevor does at all. Now they were able to adjust, credit to them, and they ran what worked for him. But like when Justin Fields committed to Georgia, I was like, why don't we take Fields, send him to Clemson, and send Trevor Lawrence to Georgia? Because that makes a lot more sense, right? At the time. And I don't know. I just think a lot of times these coaches get enamored with talent, and they just want that talent and maybe not be a good fit. Now, I say all that to get back to Geno Smith. I think the coaching staff with Seattle is doing a great job of managing expectations and then putting him in a situation to be successful. They're allowing him to do a little bit of freelance, right? And you notice that. But he's basically like a marionette. They're giving him the plays, they're telling him where to go with the ball, and he's executing that. And then every so often he's able to freelance. But I think it's just a great situation for Geno Smith. And I couldn't be happier for the guy because he was the butt of so many different jokes for such a long time. And I'm just really excited to see him have success.
Well, I mean, I think Geno Smith fell victim to what many quarterbacks fall victim to is you played for the Jets for a little while, and that's never a good situation for any quarterback. It doesn't hardly seems like any quarterback pans out in that system over there, no matter who's been head coach. They ain't found a quarterback in a long time. Mark Sanchez has been your best quarterback in the last 15 years. Yikes, butt fumble guy himself. But I think another team that's really fallen victim to the talent of a quarterback, it's these guys right here, as Rudes mentions, the Broncos right now. Holy cow. What a crap show out in Denver. What a crap show that game was on Thursday.
Oh, so bad.
Oh, my gosh.
So bad.
I would rather watch Iowa's stale offense in that game that they put on Thursday night. Good Lord. It gave me flashbacks to 2014 or 15 Georgia versus Missouri that ended at 9-6. I mean, just a freaking rock fight in the streets. It's just horrible. And I think the main issue with the Broncos right now, and we touched on this last week, we all talked about it. There's no run game. There's no reliable run game for the Broncos. And what did Russell Wilson always have, or for the most part, always have during his time in Seattle? He had Marshawn Lynch, baby. He had beast mode. He had Marshawn Lynch as his running back, and he could rely on that. And I think that's kind of where Russell Wilson excels the most, is that when teams are kind of having to play honest to both, when you're having to honor the run game, but you're also having to honor the passing game, that's, of course, when Russell Wilson is at his best, which that's when every quarterback pretty much is at their best, when you have to honor both. But still, Russell Wilson's it's just that's got to be the only reason, because we've said it again, you have all of the talent over there. You have all of the wide receivers you need, and it's just you don't have the running backs like most of these other teams do right now, and it's really hurting the Broncos. And it's just horrible. The worst part of it all is that they keep getting plugged into these primetime games every week, and every single one of them sucks. I mean,
3 of 5,
every single one of them.
3 of 5 weeks they've been in a primetime game. And to go about what you're saying about them as well, Javonte Williams, he got hurt last week and he did not play this week, so that did not help the running game. And it was a very god-awful game to watch. It was just boring. We all knew it was going to be like that beforehand. We've all talked about it. We were texting and saying, like, who's excited for this Thursday night game? Not a single one of us. Nobody wanted to watch it. We watched just because, you need to, and you're trying to watch some football and stuff like that on a Thursday night. But you got to go out of your way to watch an Amazon Prime game in the first place. It's not even on your normal TV stuff. And then you get to go out of the way just to watch a game where nobody can just move the ball effectively. And I don't really know what the issue is with Russ. I think I've always been a pretty big believer in him in general. I'll give it to you in a second, Dan. I've always been a pretty big believer of him in general. And since he's transferred over to once he got traded over to Denver and he got this huge contract, and it just hasn't been there. I don't know what happened. Like you said, maybe it was because he's so used to having that offense that he played with in Seattle, and changing to a new system, it just isn't quite working. Doesn't have the same running game that he's always had. And maybe it kind of exposed him as a quarterback and he's not as good as we all thought. I don't know. But I guess like I said earlier in the show, we're going to have to start to find that out, because that check is pretty darn big to be mid.
I think the biggest issue is that Russell Wilson's never been a great quarterback. And he got a lot of credit for things that he had nothing to do with. He handed off to Marshawn Lynch, and he had the best defense in the NFL for at least a 6-year period.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to do anything. Can he make some throws? Yeah, he can make some throws. But if you go back and watch Russell Wilson during the Super Bowl and games like that, I mean, what is he most known for? He threw the interception at the end of the game. And I mean, like, the guy read it. The guy was already breaking on the ball before he even threw it. An elite quarterback doesn't make that throw. Tom Brady, I hate the guy, but he doesn't make that throw, right? And the one thing that he was always excelled at was he was good with his legs. And I saw a tweet. It was like a video of like a collage of things since he came out of college. And they said, he is not a quarterback. He's an actor playing a quarterback. And they, like, the parallels were incredible. They talked about the people that he like mimics, the things that he says, the mannerisms that he has. It's almost like he's an actor mimicking, and that takes a whole NFL conspiracy theory to a whole nother level. But I mean, listen, all jokes aside, all kidding aside, I think the reason that you're seeing Russ not have a lot of success is because he is not an elite quarterback. He just got a lot of credit for things he didn't have anything to do with. He does have a pretty decent defense, but he doesn't have the running game, like Jonathan just mentioned, to support what he's able to do, play action. Another prime example was the guy on the other sideline from him is Matt Ryan. We all love Matt Ryan. I know I love Matt Ryan. I was a Matt Ryan stan for the longest time. But Matt Ryan is at his best when he has a running game, a really good running game to take the pressure off and allow the play action to work, because Matt Ryan excels at play action. He's really good at finding the open guy after he turns his back to him, which is a talent. It absolutely is a talent. But Matt Ryan is not the type of quarterback you want to just hand the ball to and say, go win me the game and do it all on your own. He can't do that. He's not that type of guy. Peyton Manning could do that because he was so quick with the ball and he was able to get it in his spots. Russell Wilson is not like that either, guys. He's not quick with the ball. He doesn't deliver it very fast like Peyton Manning. Like, look at Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and these guys who played with wide receivers that you don't even know who they are. I mean, like, look at all the tiny little white dudes that Tom Brady made famous. Do you think Russell Wilson would have made them equally as famous? No way in hell. But that's just my opinion on Russell. I'm not disrespecting the guy. I'm just saying he got a lot of praise for stuff that he didn't really earn.
Well, and to go into what you're talking about too with Matt Ryan, he's got Deion Jackson, Phillip Lindsay, and Naheem Hines is his running backs right now, because I guess Taylor he's still out. Jonathan Taylor.
He still ain't done. He still ain't done nothing for my fantasy team. I'm still salty about that. So that's for another day.
But that's my point, is so then you take away his run game as well. And that's why we get a rock fight of a game on a Thursday night game, because neither team has a running game and it just doesn't really work that well for you. Another game that really stood out to me today, and the last one that I have for us, was the Philadelphia Eagles and Arizona Cardinals. That game came down to the wire. You now have the Eagles winning 20-17 right before we came onto the show. That's a huge win right now. They are 5-0. They are 5-0.
They're legit,
and then you
man.
got, like, we talked about the Dolphins being the best team, potentially one of the best teams in the NFL. Well, right now it's time to talk about the Eagles, and Jalen Hurts is leading the charge.
They're the best team in the NFC.
Yeah, they are definitely the best team in the NFC, and they're arguably one of the best teams in the NFL right now in general. And you've got Jalen Hurts, of all people. We watched him in college, right? We saw him lose his starting job at Alabama for Tua, and then Tua goes off. He goes over to Oklahoma. He has a pretty good career there, and then makes it to the NFL. He's the one I fell victim to saying I didn't think he was necessarily an NFL quarterback, and that was because in college, before he went to Oklahoma, a lot of times he would run the ball first. Kind of like y'all watch Milroe play for Alabama. He was very run heavy, and people are calling him Jalen Hurts 2.0. Bama fans, that's what they're talking about, him being like that. And that's kind of the style that he played in college. Well, the problem with him in the NFL is this week, He still threw for 240 yards, I believe. He threw pretty well, didn't throw any, interceptions, touchdowns, or anything like that, but he still had a pretty decent passing game. The problem is he's running the ball too much. And that's not going – the NFL, you're going to take too many hits, and that's going to be an issue. I don't want to see him get hurt, but having 15 carries in a game, being the leading rusher and the most carries on your team, Miles Sanders only had 12, I think. That's a problem. You shouldn't have more carries than your running back.
There's only one quarterback in the NFL right now that needs to be having more carries than their running back, and it's Lamar Jackson. He is the only quarterback in the NFL right now that needs to be outrunning his running backs right now. But also, going back to Jalen Hurts, I think the best part of Jalen Hurts' career, or the best decision that he ever made, was to go to Oklahoma. Because I think him going to Oklahoma, him learning under Lincoln Riley, is what prepared him for the NFL. I wouldn't say that Alabama necessarily prepared him to be an NFL quarterback, because they utilized his athleticism. Nick Saban knew what he had at quarterback. He had a guy that could run the ball, and he could dink and dunk when you needed him to, and it kept defenses honest, because you had to have a guy spy because you knew he was going to be able to run. And so Nick Saban utilized that, and that's good on Nick Saban. But him going to Oklahoma, him going to an offense like Lincoln Riley that had offensive weapons for him to throw to, that is what groomed him into being an NFL quarterback and what has made him so successful now with the Philadelphia Eagles. But without a doubt, like I said, Eagles are the best team in the NFC, hands down.
Yeah, you just 100% stole my thunder, Jonathan. That's exactly what I was going to say. The thing that saved Jalen Hurts' career was going to Oklahoma, getting in a system with Lincoln Riley. I know we like to throw shots at Lincoln Riley sometimes just for fun. I know Jeremiah likes to throw shots at him a little bit about being out there at USC, but Lincoln Riley can develop a quarterback. I think his record stands for itself. But the one thing that he really did with Jalen Hurts is he challenged him to play in a spread offense where he was making more than one read. And that is the biggest criticism that we had of Justin Fields when he was at Ohio State. And every Ohio State quarterback ever is they play in a one-read system. Well, one-read systems don't really work in the NFL. And Jalen Hurts played, Lincoln Riley or Lane Kiffin, when he was at Alabama, it was quick, ball out. You're either going to go short or you're going to go long, one-read system, and it was very successful. Now they've expanded it. Lane Kiffin expanded it while he was at Alabama. He didn't stick with it, but just to get a guy up and running, a lot of times you'll go to that one-read system. But I think that's what saved Jalen Hurts' career, is that he went up there, he had to read the whole field. He become much more adept in making great decisions inside the pocket, and he can still run it when he has to. He made a couple really nice runs tonight to extend the play and throw a touchdown pass, and also extend the play, pick up a really crucial first down towards the end of the game.
Well, just look at his track record. Look at Lincoln Riley's track record. He put Baker Mayfield in the league. He put Kyler Murray in the league. He put Jalen Hurts in the league. He's about to put Caleb Williams in the league as well. That's 4 quarterbacks that are about to be NFL quarterbacks, and most of them are pretty good. You can say what you want about Baker Mayfield and what's going on in his situation, but he got them in that situation. He got his bag.
Still a starting quarterback.
Can't say that about
I could
Alabama.
put Caleb Williams in the NFL, but I'm just saying.
He's definitely that guy that could do that for you. But and think too, like Georgia wins the national championship in 2017 if Jalen Hurts doesn't get pulled from that game, which is the crazy thing. Had that not happened, he doesn't end up at Oklahoma, and he may not end up where he's at right now. It's crazy how the world works, and those little domino effects are actually good for you potentially.
And then if he doesn't get put in the 2018 SEC championship game, Georgia probably wins that game too.
Yeah, exactly. It's a weird way that all of that stuff played out. But while we are on the topic of talking about Alabama quarterbacks, Tua Tagovailoa sat out again today, right? Teddy Bridgewater gets the starts for the Dolphins. Teddy Bridgewater goes down with an injury, an elbow and head injury is what they called it in the first quarter, I believe, for the Dolphins. And all of a sudden, I think it was the first quarter. And so all of a sudden, Skylar Thompson, a rookie 7th-round draft pick out of Kansas State, I believe, is all of a sudden your quarterback. And that game doesn't go very well for the Dolphins. It ended up being 17-40 for the Jets. And the Jets aren't necessarily that team this year. And we talked about, Miami being such a good team. And all of a sudden they haven't had their quarterback for a little while. All that issues going on. So they kind of fell apart this week. But with that, the concussion side of things, we saw some movement there. And Dan, I'll let you start with this. What have you seen from the new rule in the concussion protocol in the NFL so far? This week was the first week that it was in play, and it was relevant.
It was absolutely relevant. It was ironic that it was the Dolphins that were the first ones to fall victim to it. But it's basically, and I don't remember the exact wording, maybe you guys have it, but it's basically no re-entry.
I'll get it.
If you're taken out of the game for a concussion, there's no re-entry into the game. And I mean, I understand it. And, again, my son was watching TV with me and he said, I don't think he's got a concussion, Dad. I'm like, but you have to understand they're extremely sensitive to it right now because of what happened to Tua. What happened to Tua, if we're talking about this is the NFL and then this is what happened to Tua. They're not the same planet. They're not the same atmosphere, okay? What happened to Tua was atrocious and unfathomable that somebody would allow that to happen. But now the flip side of that is that you're going to have people being extremely reactive to all types of head injuries. And I mean, at the end of the day, what are we talking about? A game, right? We're talking about a game as opposed to somebody's life. So I do not have any animosity to the NFLPA for putting that rule in of no re-entry. I mean, it's one game versus your life. Maybe you're fine. Maybe you just got dinged up. Maybe you just got your bell rung, which we've all had that happen. If you've ever played football, you've gotten your bell rung, and it sucks in the moment, but give it a couple minutes and you're fine, right? Maybe that's a concussion. Maybe it's not. I don't know. I've had a bunch of them. I'm kind of dumb now, so maybe I've had a lot of them. I'm not sure. But I'm just saying, like, I get it. I understand it. I'm on board with it. No re-entry. And then there was a couple other guys today. One of them was an offensive lineman. I don't know what happened to Kelsey in the Eagles game. But I don't know if that was a lower body injury or a head injury. I know the Rams had a guy go
that either.
Yeah, the Rams had an offensive lineman go down. But in fairness, Matthew Stafford is the one that hit him in the head with his head, and he was dazed and confused. So why didn't Stafford have to come out? But
Stafford wasn't laying on the ground holding his helmet like this, though. That's the difference. Like you could clearly tell.
Also one tough MFer. I mean, we've known that about.
It's visible signs. It goes back to visible signs of showing a concussion. Like the whole Tua thing was he was clearly not okay. You had this offensive lineman laying on the ground holding his back injury, laying on the ground holding his head. That shows you he's physically not okay. And so they have to take that. Stafford just hopped up and was good to go. Like he was. You take hits to the head all the time in playing football in general. If you don't show signs of something, then they're not going to pull you on that. But this is the statement that was put out. It said, for clarity, Dolphins say Teddy Bridgewater passed his concussion test, but was ruled out due to concussion protocol based on what the ATC spotter saw from Bridgewater and the new NFLPA protocols. And that just means that the the independent neurologist was the one that saw something and said, hey, he shouldn't play again. He passed his protocol, but the spotter saw something, some sign. Once again, whether or not you thought he had a concussion or not, they saw something that said, hey, he's in concussion protocol. He shouldn't play anymore.
Well, and the other one that was really bad this week, and if you guys were watching the Saints game, Chris Olave, who has been an amazing rookie for the Saints, which we don't like Ohio State and we don't like the Saints, but I can tell you the guy's been balling out. But he made a great play in the end zone, had his hands on the ball. The guy was trying to rip the ball out, and he turned and he flung him face first onto the ground. And Olave was out, fellas, out to the world. Like I was seriously concerned by he was out. And, he was back up, walking up and down the sidelines, acting like he wanted to go in. They didn't let him go in. And then Nick Bosa, the one for the 49ers defensive end, they held him out for the rest of the game. Again, like I said, it's one game and it's these guys' health. So you have to protect them from themselves.
Yeah. And I think our guy Colonel makes a great point here in the comment section. Even if you want to look at it from a cold-blooded business perspective, you have to protect your assets or you will lose them entirely. Yeah. That's it.
It's huge.
This is the bottom. That's the bottom line. You have to protect. Who's the most valuable person on the field? It's the quarterback. You have to protect your assets. And I think it's only fitting that I hate that. I'm not saying that Teddy Bridgewater deserved this or anything like that, but I think it's only fitting that the Dolphins were one of the teams that fell victim to this new protocol with the concussions. Because it's like, all right, do you understand how this works now? Do you get it? Like, This is what you have to do because of you. You can be mad about the new protocol, but at the end of the day, it is your own fault. So now Teddy Bridgewater has to come out of the game. You have to put in Skylar Thompson, a 7th-round pick, because you did not listen to it before, and you decided to put one of your players' lives on the line a week ago. And now we have to put this in place because you did not want to follow protocol. So you can only hate yourselves in that instance if you're the Dolphins. And because of that, well, you fell victim to it yet again. But the most important thing is that you took care of Teddy Bridgewater. You took care of other players like Olave, or they are not put in harm's way at all. Because Dan mentioned it last week, players want to play. So they're going to put themselves in harm's way at some points because they want to be out on the field. They don't want to be sitting on the bench regardless of what happens. Matthew Stafford, I said that he was one tough MFer. The dude popped his shoulder out of place like his rookie year, gets it popped back into place, and goes out and slings a touchdown to win the game, I believe.
That play was – if you have not seen that play, you've got to go look that up. That play is insane.
The guy up and everything.
He's mic'd up. It's insane. He goes to the sideline after getting it taken out, and he's on the sideline. He was injured, so he couldn't come back in. All of a sudden, I think the other team called a timeout, and so it gave him the opportunity to go back in. And he runs. They're trying to hold him to look at him. He just runs away from him and goes back in the game. Throws the touchdown pass, like you said, and then as soon as he scores, everyone starts running up trying to celebrate. He goes, don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me. And he gets to the sideline. He goes, it's out. It's out. Like his shoulder was popped out of socket. The dude is tough.
They never put it back in that particular play that you're talking about. They were trying to get him to the sideline to put it back in. He runs back out on the field.
Yeah.
He's like, I can throw it, I can throw it, I can throw it. And he throws the daggum. You're right. He's old school.
He's a different type of player as far as the toughness goes. So
that's
he took a little bit of a shot today,
that you're dealing
but he
with
was okay
in this game. Players that will put themselves in those type of situations, you cannot trust them to make those judgment calls in that situation, especially when you're dealing with concussion. They probably aren't even the right mindset to be making a judgment call whether or not they should be in the game anyways. So good on the NFL for implementing a new protocol to where teams really do not even have the option to make that call and even twist and bend the rules a little bit to where we have another situation like Tua.
Yeah, exactly. And it was good to see that it actually played out the way that it was supposed to today. It was great for us as NFL fans and for the NFL as a whole. Like Colonel said, protecting the assets out there, even if they're wanting to kind of push them a little further or the player themselves want to push themselves a little further. Last game I want to talk about, fellas, before we get into our picks for Sunday night and Monday Night Football is the 49ers. 49ers beat the Panthers 37-15. We were critical. I was critical on them. I think every single one of us picked them to lose against the Rams the other night on Monday night, and they ended up beating the Rams 24-9. Then they play this week and win 37-15 over Carolina. Is it time for us to start getting a little bit more credit to Jimmy G and the 49ers offense being a little bit better than we thought? Or is it maybe the fact that the Rams obviously just aren't great? We saw them lose again today, and the Panthers just are, I think they're 1-4, so they're obviously not that good with Baker. What's the difference here, Dan?
49ers defense is elite. That's the difference. Their defense, they're playing in, oh my gosh, I can't remember his name. Former linebacker is their defensive coordinator, young guy, and he is an absolute field general out there, guys. I mean, these guys are rallying around him. They're playing hard for him, and I cannot believe his name has escaped me. Somebody in the comment, tell me the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. But he is playing incredible football right now, boys, on that defensive side of the ball, and Jimmy G is doing just enough.
DeMarco Ryans, played linebacker in the NFL for a long time. He's still a really young guy, and he's got that defense playing really, really well. We have to take it with a grain of salt, right? Because the Panthers are a terrible football team. We know that. We understand that. And maybe the Rams aren't as good as they're supposed to be, but it's the NFL and it's any given Sunday, right, boys? And you got to win every single Sunday. And right now they're taking care of business. So yeah, until they prove that they can't compete on a bigger stage with a better team, you have to give him credit, and I think the most of that credit needs to go to DeMarco Ryans and the defense that he's putting on the field. They're playing fast, they're playing physical, they're getting to the ball, they're making stops, and they're just being stingy with points. I was really impressed by that defense. And listen, Carolina's not a good football team, but they got some playmakers, Christian McCaffrey and the Anderson guy, who I don't know who he is, but he's a heck of a playmaker. Robbie Anderson has been in the league for about 6 years. Yeah, he's been in the league for about 6 years, Robbie Anderson. He's pretty good. Jonathan, what do you think about this?
I think it's just Carolina's a bad team. I think Carolina is absolutely horrible. They are not a good football team at all. And now I will say, I will give respect when respect is due. I've been writing off the 49ers for a couple of weeks now, and especially was writing them off when they went to go play the Rams. And boy, did they prove me wrong. Jimmy G finds a way somehow, typically, when he's the quarterback. He's finding a way right now. He's keeping them alive, and that defense is legit. The 49ers have always had a really good defense. And Jimmy G just has good weapons to work with. Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, both of those guys are really good players to work with. They're playmakers.
Kittle.
Basically, George Kittle, who basically is an inline blocker permanently now at this point in his career. But, I mean, Deebo Samuel – he's a guy that just toss it to him and let him run. He'll score. He'll find a way in the end zone. He did it last week against the Rams. Crazy. He is. He's absolutely insane. Out of South Carolina too, who's not very much known for their wide receivers, but he is definitely one that has hit in the NFL.
He's the guy that said he didn't know who DeAndre Baker was, and then DeAndre Baker got a pick over top of him.
Infamously known for that.
You know me now.
Known for that one. Yeah, he is that guy from South Carolina.
Well, they had that running back Wilson, who I didn't really know who he was, and he had a really good football game today. I don't know if that's a one-hit wonder type of deal, or if he's a guy who's coming out of the woodworks to be a really solid running back. But had a good game. I mean, listen, the 49ers played a good game. Like Jonathan said, I kind of mentioned, the Carolina's a bad football team, so you have to understand that. Like I said, take it with a grain of salt. But at the same time, if they're going to keep winning, then it doesn't matter.
Well, let's do this. This is what we got to look at. They play the Falcons next Sunday at 1:00. So that's obviously not a great team to play against. The following week is when let that be our measuring stick. They have to play the Chiefs. The Chiefs have a great offense, obviously, so they score a lot of points. That is going to be a test for that defense that you're talking about. DeMarco Ryans and his defense is going to have to step up there. And that's going to lead us into our picks for the night. One of those games is the Chiefs, which is not actually the one we're going to pick first, because the first game is the Ravens and Bengals. That's actually about to kick off in 5 minutes, I believe. So we need to hurry up and get out of here so we can get everybody that's wanting to watch that game over to it. But we'll start with that. Jonathan, what's your pick? I think the spread is 3 points. Bengals at the Ravens. What do you got?
Bengals are favored in this one?
Baltimore -3.
Baltimore is -3.
Man, it's hard to bet against Lamar Jackson right now. That dude is a freaking highlight reel. He's putting up video game numbers, and he has been on his A game. Now, I will say they are without Bateman tonight. They're star wide receivers, so they're going to have to rely on some guys like Devin Duvernay, Mark Andrews, a tight end, but still got some solid weapons around there. And quite frankly, the Bengals offensive line still continues to struggle. Joey Burr does not have the protection that they thought they would have this season, even though they put a major emphasis on protecting him. So I think I'm going to go with the better athlete in this one. I'm going to rock with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens.
Well, listen, that's a good pick, a solid pick, and not so fast, my friend. I'm going to go on the other side of that, and I'm going to go with Macaulay Culkin at quarterback. And, I mean, listen, he's got Jamar Chase. He's got T. Higgins. He's got a bunch of different guys to go to.
T. Higgins is
got Hayden Hurst at tight end.
He's expected to play, though. He is expected to play.
Okay. They got Joe Milton at running back. They've got listen, the Bengals have all the weapons. They're the biggest question is, can their defense stop Baltimore enough? And I don't know if they can or they can't, but I know I'm going to be rooting for the Bengals to win the football game because I like watching that offense. So I'm going to go Bengals. For no other reason than I just want to.
All right, so I'm also going to go with the Bengals on the road against Lamar Jackson and Baltimore. My reasoning for that is I saw something today. The last 5 home games that Baltimore has had have all been decided by 11 total points, and Baltimore's 0-5 at home.
Good.
So that's not good. You're in prime time. Lights are on. Bengals do have a pretty good team. Like you said, so many weapons for Joe Burrow. His protection is a little bit of an issue there. But Higgins is expected to play. I have him in fantasy, so I've been watching that one pretty close today. So that's pretty important for me.
Thank you, James Goddard.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I do expect them to have a pretty decent game today. I think it's going to be a really close one. I think that 3-point spread is pretty good because it is going to be a game that's going to be a one-possession game. And so it'll be a fun one to watch tonight. I know all of us are going to be tuned in. The next one is going to be Chiefs and Raiders. Kansas City is a 7-point favorite in that game at home against the Raiders. And Dan, what do you like?
So I just want to start this conversation by saying that everybody was crapping on the Raiders, and I told you every single game that they lost was extremely close, and they could have won it. I mean, much in the same way the Falcons, right? Falcons 2-3, could be 5-0. You can make that argument. The Raiders going into Monday night are going to be 1-3, 0-2 on the road, and this is a road game. I think the Raiders are a much better football team than people are willing to give them credit for. I think this would be a very good football game. I just think the Chiefs are too much. So I'm going to take the Chiefs and lay the points, but understand that I think the Raiders are a really good football team, and this is going to be a really good game.
Jonathan.
I think this is a really big game for the Raiders. 1-3 right now. They're itching for a win, and you're in a really competitive conference. So every win matters, and this one's a big one against one of them in the Kansas City Chiefs. I will say the Chiefs are allowing close to 290 passing yards per game right now. Don't have much of a secondary, and the Raiders got some weapons. They got Waller and they got Adams, and they got a quarterback to distribute it to them. So I think I'm going to rock with the Raiders on this one. I think that I will say the Raiders are giving up a good amount of running game, but I don't know how consistent the Chiefs' running game can be in that instance. But I'm going to rock with the Raiders in this one. I think the Chiefs are going to give up too much in the air. Devontae Adams is going to be too much of a problem for them. And then if you give too much attention to him, Darren Waller is just going to crush you as well. So I'm going to take the Raiders in this one. Big win for the Raiders out there in Las Vegas.
See, I like the gutsiness of taking the Raiders because the Chiefs did lose earlier in the season to the Colts by 3 points. That was in Indianapolis, so it was. But I don't think that's a game that we're going to see again. I have a lot of family actually that's Raiders fans, so I follow them pretty close, and I like the Raiders overall. I just don't think that they're going to be able to overcome the road atmosphere playing in Kansas City. Their passing game can get going with Derek Carr and Darren Waller. So I think that they have a good opportunity to get some stuff going there. Like you said, the passing game for defense for Kansas City is not very good, but Kansas City's rushing defense is probably one of the best in the league. They're only allowing 65 yards a game right now. And I think that if you can start making some plays on the defensive side in the passing game and try to make them run the ball, it's going to be a long night for the Raiders, and I don't think they're going to be able to keep up. That's the issue. Yeah, I think it could be a good game. I just don't think they're going to be able to keep up with Kansas City offensively in this one. Neither team has a great defense. I think they both allow roughly 25 points a game. So it's just no great defense, just pretty good offense in this game. So I expect this should not be one of those games that's like a 15 to 12 game or something like that.
Get the Broncos out of prime time
something.
For crying out loud. Goodness
we
gracious.
should get some points tonight,
set
fellas.
ahead of time, but my goodness. Just
Dan, you look like you had something else you wanted to say.
Oh, not relative to the game, but I just did want to say that I did notice that our podcast or this show has not been coming out in the form of podcast, so we'll get that corrected. Make sure you like and subscribe, and stay with us for more content, guys. We enjoy doing this, and we want to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And this game right now is about to kick off with the the Ravens and Bengals. So we're going to start tuning into that. We know you guys are as well. And so we appreciate everybody tuning in this Sunday. We will be back again next week with the three of us here. So make sure you guys stay tuned for some content. And Dan and Jonathan, we can get that onto a podcast platform. We'll work on that as well. So if you need to listen to this later on in the week, guys, we'll start making sure it's out there for you as well. Look up the 4 Wide Podcast on any listening device that you like, and we will catch you guys next week. Jonathan, close it out.